In today's video, we will be delving into the world of one of the most infamous prison gangs in the United States, the Mexican Mafia. We'll explore the origins of the Mexican Mafia, its structure, rules, and crimes. Our focus will be on a chilling multiple murder orchestrated by the gang that shook the streets of Los Angeles, involving victims as young as 5 years old and just 6 months old. The Mexican Mafia, also known as Miami, was founded in 1957 by 13 Hispanic street gang members hailing from various Los Angeles neighborhoods. The Mexican Mafia was formed in prison for the purpose of protecting Hispanic inmates from other prison gangs. By 1977, it had gained control of most criminal activities in California's prisons. Over time, its influence expanded beyond prison walls, extending to virtually all Hispanic street gangs in Southern California, such as La Sangra and El Monte Flores. Records indicate that the Mexican Mafia consists of approximately 300 to 500 members. In Los Angeles County, the majority of Hispanic gang members claim allegiance to the Mexican Mafia. Members of Hispanic gangs essentially serve as soldiers for the Mexican Mafia, facing potential violence or death if they refuse to carry out orders from the gang. Upon joining the Mexican Mafia, members take a blood oath and are bound by a code where death is the only way out. Even years after leaving the gang, individuals who attempt to disassociate themselves are at risk of being targeted and killed. Those with membership in the gang are referred to as carnal, the Spanish word for brother. The gang enlists an army of associates which includes various Hispanic street gangs under its control. These associates are commonly known as camarada or comrades. Additionally, there are sympathizers, including friends and family members, who assist the gang by relaying messages, handling money, and distributing drugs. Members of the gang are expected to adhere to a strict set of unwritten rules and behaviors. Loyalty to the gang takes precedence over everything else, surpassing allegiance to family, local street gangs, and even God. Members are prohibited from showing weakness or cowardice, criticizing fellow members, cooperating with law enforcement, or revealing their membership to outsiders. In the context of prison gangs like the Mexican Mafia, a dropout refers to a member who chooses to disassociate from the gang. If someone requests to drop out of a gang to prison staff, they are debriefed by prison correctional staff familiar with gangs, where they must share all the information they know about leaders, members, rivals, and everything related to the gang they are trying to drop out from. This information is then shared with law enforcement officials. The gang does not permit its members to drop out. Its motto is blood in, blood out, meaning that you spill blood to come in, and your blood will be spilled if you try to leave. When a member decides to drop out of the gang, they are immediately put on a hit list or green light list, which means that any member of the Mexican Mafia who is nearby and capable must kill the dropout. Only another Mexican Mafia member is authorized to carry out such an execution. Failing to eliminate a person on the hit list when given the chance puts that member at risk of being added to the list and targeted themselves. The passage of time does not diminish the responsibility of a gang member to follow through with these orders, even years or decades later. Any member of the Mexican Mafia holds the authority to add someone to the hit list. Having a tattoo of the letters EME serves as undeniable proof of affiliation with the Mexican Mafia. Anyone displaying such a tattoo who is not a member of the gang faces the threat of physical assault or potentially being killed. The Mexican Mafia is funded through levying taxes on Hispanic street gangs and drug dealers operating within its territory. Drug dealers typically owe 1/3 of their earnings to the gang, payable in cash, drugs, weapons, or vehicles. Those working under the protection of the Mexican Mafia expect immunity from theft or violence perpetrated by other street gang members, with the consequence for violating this protection being death. Members of the Mexican Mafia are primarily involved in drug dealing as a means of financial support. The gang also earns money by overseeing the transportation of drugs from the streets into prisons and jails across California and the Southwest. A portion of the proceeds generated from drug-related activities is allocated to assist gang members who are unable to support themselves, such as those in segregated housing units within prisons. One of the key rules within the Mexican Mafia prohibits its members from harming innocent children. Even if a street gang member causes the death of a child inadvertently through their actions, they will be placed on a hit list. When carrying out murders, the gang often uses overkill, where multiple assailants inflict numerous wounds on the victim in a brutal manner to send a message. It is common for the gang to assign close friends or family members of the victim to execute the killings, sometimes using drugs or other means to relax the victim in order to make them easier to kill. In some instances, the Mexican Mafia utilizes individuals being considered for membership or newly recruited members to commit murders as a test. Despite its relatively small size, the Mexican Mafia's impact on Hispanic street gang members in Southern California is substantial and far-reaching. There have been instances where Mexican Mafia members enter into rival gang areas and confront hundreds of opposing or rival gang members and walk with impunity through them, slap them, embarrass them, point guns at them without repercussion. Membership in the Mexican Mafia holds significant weight compared to a regular street gang, as members possess the authority to give orders to and influence a substantial portion of Hispanic gang members in Los Angeles. The Mexican Mafia's influence stems from the widespread understanding among Hispanic street gang members that a gang member will probably be arrested and have to do time in either a juvenile, county, or state facility. And he knows that the juvenile, state, or county facility is completely controlled by the Mexican Mafia. So if he offends the Mexican Mafia, or does anything in contrast as opposed to the power and respect of the Mexican Mafia, he can expect to be dealt with in that facility. In April 1995, the Mexican Mafia was using Hispanic street gangs to commit crimes and collect taxes for them in the San Gabriel Valley. Over an 18-month period leading up to April 1995, the Metropolitan Gang Task Force, comprising of the FBI, CDC, and Los Angeles Police Department, identified locations of Mafia meetings and secretly recorded them. Most of these meetings took place in motel rooms. The task force enlisted informants to book adjacent rooms for installing electronic surveillance equipment. The gang was not aware that their meetings were being recorded and monitored. Victor Jimenez, known as Muggsy, Jimmy Palma, known as Character, Daniel Logan, known as Tricky, Anthony Torres, known as Scar, Richard Valdez, known as Primo, and Jose Ortiz are all members of La Sangre street gang in San Gabriel. During the time of this incident, La Sangre had approximately 500 members. Anthony Moreno, known as Dido, lived with his sister Maria Moreno and her 5 children at her home on 3843 Maxon Road in El Monte. Dido used to be a member of the El Monte Hayes street gang. He went to prison multiple times and began his association with the Mexican Mafia during a stint in prison in 1969. By 1972, while at San Quentin prison, he became a member of the Mexican Mafia. His brother was his cellmate at the time. Dido's brother, who we will refer to as Moreno, is a member of the El Monte Flores street gang. He had been an associate but was never a member of the Mexican Mafia. Moreno knew Raymond Shyrock, also known as Huero Shy. They served time together in San Quentin from 1972 to 1977, during which Raymond officially joined the Mexican Mafia alongside Dido. Raymond used to live just 2 apartments down the street from Maria's home. Dido dropped out of the Mexican Mafia in 1983, which is a mandatory death sentence. Moreno warned his brother that something was going to happen, but Dido insisted that Raymond was not a threat to him because he knew him for so many years. In January 1995, Moreno was paroled from state prison to his home on Loma Street in South El Monte, where he lived with his wife and children. The 2 brothers spiraled into addiction and started injecting heroin, which led them to commit crimes to fuel their habits. Dido would steal goods and sell them to a fence who operated at a barber shop in Arcadia. Gustavo Aguirre, known as Tito, was a personal friend of the family and was also addicted to heroin. Tito was involved in robbing several Hispanic drug dealers, including at least one who was paying taxes to the Mexican Mafia. This would have subjected him to being killed by the gang. Moreno was aware of what Tito was doing. Raymond expressed his frustration to Moreno, stating he was tired of Tito disrespecting him and robbing dope connections, and that sooner or later he was going to pay for that. Luis Maciel, also known as Pelon, is a member of the Mexican Mafia. Raymond put Luis in the Mexican Mafia in 1995, and Luis told all the homeboys from the neighborhood several times. Luis was proud of being a member and said he was going to put in a lot of work. Luis also used to be a personal friend of Moreno's family at one time. Some individuals involved in this case, including witnesses and members who decided to cooperate with law enforcement, have had their names redacted in the official records out of concern for their safety. Around noon on April 22, 1995, a blue Jeep pulled up in front of Maria's house with its engine running. Subsequently, a second car parked behind the Jeep, and around 4 men with tattoos got out, briefly walked towards the house, then returned to their car and left. The blue Jeep drove away at the same time. Approximately 2 hours later, neighbors saw 3 or 4 tattooed gang members with shaved heads in Maria's yard. Around 2:30 p.m., the gang members were seen again. A neighbor was sitting on her porch with Tito when he saw the men. Tito leaned close to the neighbor and said that he was leaving because the Mafia had arrived, and he did not want to have any problems with them. He said there was going to be a really big problem there. Tito then ran inside the home and hid. Luis Maciel approached Dido and his brother Moreno, who were in Maria's driveway. Accompanying Luis were 2 younger men, one of whom had an El Monte Flores gang tattoo on his arm. They were dressed in oversized t-shirts, tennis shoes, and baggy jeans. Luis spoke with Dido and his brother for about 30 minutes. Luis seemed nervous and unusually talkative. The other men were very quiet and appeared to be casing out the location. As Luis spoke, he faced the home's entrance and was peering inside. He saw Maria and her children. Tito was inside the house watching TV with Maria and 3 of her children, while the other 2 kids, Jose, who was 12 years old, and Laura, who was 5 years old, were playing in the backyard on the swings. Luis told Moreno that he had come by just to greet the family and ask how they were doing. He also asked about Tito's whereabouts. Later on, Luis offered heroin to the 2 brothers. They told Luis that they had run out of money and would pay him as soon as possible. Luis said not to worry about it, and that they didn't owe him anything. Moreno found this very unusual because people don't normally give away drugs. Moreno was afraid the heroin might be a hot shot, meaning it might have been laced with other substances. He tried a small amount of heroin and saw that it was not laced. 2 former gang members decided to cooperate with law enforcement. We will be referring to them as Clown and Bull. Luis later met with Clown, who was an El Monte Flores gang member, Jimmy Palma, and another gang member known as Diablo at Luis's house. Luis told Jimmy, "If anything happens to me, go ahead and contact Diablo." Jimmy stated he was going to take care of some business for Luis and was strapping. Based on Luis's direction, Clown provided Jimmy with a small amount of heroin from the house. Later in the day, Bull received a call from Jimmy requesting to be picked up in his 1991 red Thunderbird. During their drive, Jimmy informed Bull that he was waiting for a page from Anthony and that he would have to drop him off at Anthony's house. Jimmy said that he had to do a favor for the Carnals. Subsequently, upon being paged, Bull drove Jimmy to Anthony's house, where they joined Anthony, Richard, Daniel, Jose, and Clown. Upon Anthony's arrival with Luis, they entered his room and started making phone calls. Jose, seemingly the one in charge, stated that there was a problem in El Monte and that they had to go there to take care of something. Jose and Jimmy were doing meth in Anthony's room, and Jimmy shaved his head. Later that day, at around 6 or 7 p.m., a neighbor was talking to Tito across the property's fence. Tito looked nervous and said that the Mafia was going to come. Sometime before 9 p.m., the gang members organized into 2 groups and left for El Monte. Daniel drove his Nissan Maxima with Luis, Jimmy, and Anthony, while Bull followed in his Thunderbird with Jose and Clown. Bull briefly lost sight of the Nissan about a block from Luis's house, but spotted it again as it turned into a driveway on Maxon Road. Bull drove past Maria's house and parked his Thunderbird a couple of blocks away. Jose got out of the car, walked to the corner, and acted as a lookout. Around 10:30 p.m., a neighbor saw Tito running towards Maria's home. As Tito reached the driveway to the back of the home, the Nissan arrived and Luis, Jimmy, and Anthony exited the vehicle, with Daniel staying inside. The 3 men walked purposefully to the back of Maria's house as well, and less than a minute later, gunshots rang out. They ran to the Nissan, which then sped away with its lights off. A police car behind the Thunderbird turned on its lights and drove in the same direction as the Nissan. Jose re-entered the car, and as the police began to arrive, he said, "Let's go. Let's get out of here." The El Monte Police Department responded to a radio call they received at 10:34 p.m., reporting that a small child had run to a neighbor's house saying that his mother had been shot. Officers spoke with the residents of that address, as well as a boy who was visibly distressed, approximately 5 or 6 years old, with blood-stained clothing, who confirmed that his mother had been shot. At the boy's direction, officers walked next door to the rear of Maria's home. By approximately 10:40 p.m., the officers saw Tito outside the home, lying in a pool of blood with a gunshot wound to the head. Inside the home, they discovered Dido's body wedged between a mattress and a wall, with one leg draped over the bed. Maria's body was found on the living room floor alongside her 2 children, Laura Moreno and Ambrose Padilla. A child's bloody handprint was found near Maria. 45 caliber shell casings and bullet fragments were found at the scene. Additionally, during their search of the premises, an uninjured toddler, aged around 2 or 3 years old, was found hiding in a corner and crying. The 3 adults were dead. They all had brain matter showing. The children were transported to a hospital because under Los Angeles County protocols and procedures, they did not meet the criteria to pronounce them dead at the scene. In fact, Laura was still breathing. Despite efforts to provide life support measures, Laura and Ambrose passed away in the hospital. During the autopsy examinations, it was found that Dido had died from a single gunshot wound to the head. The bullet had entered near his right ear and exited from the left side. The close proximity of the wound on the skin suggested that the gun had been pressed to his head when it was fired. Tito's cause of death was determined to be a gunshot wound to the top of his head, with similar evidence of a contact wound indicating the gun had been pressed against his head. Additionally, Tito had a non-fatal gunshot wound in his left shoulder, suggesting he may have been shot while at least partially lying on a bed. Maria succumbed to a gunshot wound to the head that was fired from a few inches to 1 foot away. She also had a non-fatal gunshot wound in her right buttock. Laura's death was the result of a gunshot to her torso, which entered through her back, punctured her lung, and exited from her chest. The angle of the wound indicated she may have been seated, lying down, or slightly bent over at the time of the shooting. Ambrose's fatal gunshot wound entered his right eye, traveled through his mouth, base of his brain, and spinal cord, before exiting from the back of his neck. Evidence suggested he was lying on his back when shot, as indicated by a hole in the pillow underneath him. At the time of their deaths, Tito was 35 years of age, Dido was 44, Maria was 38, Laura was 5, and Ambrose was 6 months old. At the scene of the murders, numerous expended bullet casings were found and bullet fragments were retrieved from several of the victims during the autopsies. In addition, the police discovered phone and pager records which indicated that 6 calls were made to Luis's pager from the homes of Anthony and Jimmy on the day of the murders, with an additional 4 calls made the following day. When the men were fleeing from the scene, after Jose re-entered the car, he directed the group to Richard's apartment. After a brief stop there, they went to Anthony's home. When the men arrived at Anthony's house, Daniel's Nissan was already in the driveway. Inside, Luis, Jimmy, Daniel, and Anthony were drinking beer and listening to a police scanner to see if the people were dead. The men started discussing the shootings. Luis, as a member of the Mexican Mafia, acted as a self-described middleman and recruited street gang members Anthony, Richard, Daniel, Jimmy, and Jose to murder Dido, due to him being a Mexican Mafia dropout who had disassociated himself from the gang. Jimmy said that, while he showed a man some heroin, Primo had shot him in the head. Primo was Richard Valdez's street name. The victims were tricked into thinking that the shooters were interested in buying drugs. He also said that, after the man had got shot, the lady with the baby said that it wasn't her problem, at which point he pulled out the gun and shot her and let off rounds on the kids. Luis said he had shot one guy in the temple and another guy running away from him. Anthony said he had stood by the door with the shotgun making sure nobody would walk up. Bull left Anthony's home after midnight. The following morning, Dido's brother Moreno confronted Raymond about his potential involvement in the murders. Raymond said that he was sorry to hear about that, and he seen it on the news that morning at 5. He offered his condolences and said that he would have done it in another way, if he had something to do with it. Moreno knew that Raymond was being dishonest with him during their conversation. Raymond showed no remorse for the death of Tito, stating, "That bastard. He was forcing me to kill him or do something to him, so I don't feel bad about him dying." Early the next morning after the murders on Sunday, Anthony's sister came across news of the murders in the newspaper and discussed them with her mother. The mother indicated that when she said to Anthony, "They killed 2 little innocent kids," he replied, "Well, there weren't supposed to be any kids there." On Monday, Anthony's sister spoke with her brother about the murders. Anthony told her that he and the other gang members were supposed to kill one guy, but they weren't supposed to leave any witnesses. If anybody got in the way, that they had to take care of them. Anthony confirmed that Richard and Jimmy were responsible for carrying out the shootings. He further informed his sister that because Jimmy had killed 2 children, they were going to take care of him. Bull was later approached by law enforcement approximately 1 or 2 months after the murders. Initially, Bull lied and refused to testify during grand jury proceedings, even after being granted immunity. After he spent 8 days in jail after he was held in contempt, Bull consulted with his attorney and eventually agreed to cooperate. In exchange for his comprehensive and truthful testimony during the trial, Bull was granted immunity. The district attorney's office warned Bull that failure to adhere to these conditions would result in his prosecution for murder. Bull was apprehensive about testifying initially because he, in his words, was scared of, the people that we are dealing with aren't very nice people. Law enforcement showed him a photo of him with Sangra gang members, with his face scratched out, and the number 187 was written across his chest. 187 is often used by gangs as a synonym for murder. This defacement indicated that Sangra gang members wanted to kill him for testifying. The Mexican Mafia also targeted Moreno. Moreno was once an associate of the Mexican Mafia but distanced himself after being debriefed while in custody at the Chino County Jail in 1985. The debriefing, along with his cooperation in this case, has resulted in him being put on a hard candy list, which is what a hit list is called in prison. The Mexican Mafia wanted Moreno dead immediately. Moreno was the target of 5 separate stabbing attempts while detained in the county jail and did not receive any help from the district attorney's office in exchange for his testimony. Clown was serving a prison sentence for kidnapping and robbery during the trial. He received no incentives from the district attorney's office in exchange for his testimony, except for a promise to help him transfer to a federal facility out of state due to safety concerns. Clown chose to testify because, in his words, "I want to testify and because of these kids dying along with their mother, and that is why I am testifying." Regarding the recordings prior to the murders on January 4, 1995, a monitored meeting of the Mexican Mafia captured Raymond, who had become a leader in the Mexican Mafia, saying, "I don't know if you have ever heard of this brother Dido. He dropped out a long time ago. He's in an apartment where I was living. All kinds of people in the pad, bunch of young sisters and kids, all kinds. So I'm trying to figure out how to. I need a silencer is what I need. See now. I just want to kill him, not the little kids." This was consistent with the Mexican Mafia's policy. They do not sanction the killing of innocent women and children. During a videotaped meeting on April 2, 1995, just 19 days prior to the murders, Raymond pushed for the Mexican Mafia to accept Luis as a member of the gang. Other members expressed concerns about Luis, as they hadn't had a chance to get to know him. They also objected to admitting new members as the gang had decided to close its ranks. Raymond talked at length about Luis's credentials for membership. He argued that Luis had already taken care of a lot of business for the Mafia and had downed a whole bunch of mother. He also disclosed that Luis had taken care of one of his homies who killed a 1-year-old baby. As the meeting was in progress, Luis arrived and was asked to wait outside while the members discussed his membership. Subsequently, Luis was invited back in and officially welcomed into the Mexican Mafia. This was significant as Luis maintained that although he was a member of the El Monte Flores Street gang, he denied being a carnal or full-fledged member of the Mexican Mafia. He claimed to have ran little errands here and there for the Mexican Mafia, like covering legal expenses, but denied any further involvement in the Mexican Mafia. Luis even disclosed to law enforcement that his name came up in a list to be taken out at one point because the Mexican Mafia believed he had falsely claimed to be a member. Anthony Torres was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for his role in the murders. Daniel Logan and Jose Ortiz were convicted as accomplices and were sentenced to 129 years to life in prison. Luis Maciel, Richard Valdez, and Jimmy Palma were sentenced to death. Jimmy's shooting of the 2 children which violated the unwritten policy of the Mexican Mafia, provoked anger and swift retribution. After his trial and death sentence, Jimmy Palma was murdered at San Quentin State Prison. During a police interview following his arrest, Richard Valdez expressed fear for his family because of his role in the murders and stated, "My kids, my wife, they'll all be all flicked up because of me." Thank you for watching.